One of our fundamental rights in this country is the freedom of expression, and that includes the freedom to organize demonstrations and to protest against the government. The current Occupy Wall Street movement, which has spread nationwide, is a vivid example. Before we begin our discussion on today's edition of The Professors, let's take a look at this student-produced video story about the Occupy movement here in Chicago.
This Occupy movement will last until something is done. And I don't care how long it is, I will be out here in the middle of January if I have to.
There is no other option anymore. This is the end of an era, the beginning of a new. And for there to be a beginning of the new, we must destroy things to create something beautiful.
There is that sense, I think, that growing sense that this country is bought and paid for. And we're objecting to that.
Members of Occupy Chicago have occupied the intersection of Jackson and LaSalle, the heart of Chicago's financial district, since September. It's a grassroots movement that began on Wall Street, made up of mostly young people. The Occupy movement has been compared to the recent Tea Party movement and civil rights movement of the 1960s. It has even inspired others to stage similar protests, like the sit-down demonstration just 1 block away at Jackson and Clark, which shut down traffic in the Loop for nearly 1 hour.
We want the Glass-Steagall Act to be reinforced to keep banks and investments separate.
Demonstrators from the Jane Addams Senior Caucus were protesting against proposed cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and housing. There appears to be widespread support for the Occupy movement among people we spoke to.
The fact that it's not just a single issue, but it's bringing attention to how the whole system is not working for the majority of Americans.
I feel that our voice over the years has gotten smaller and smaller, and our government is not representative of the people anymore. I think they represent crony capitalism instead of capitalism.
These are big problems, so I'm not too concerned with sort of immediately right now. The fact that it's drawing so many people shows that people are finally coming together.
Reporting for the Professors on WYCC, I'm Ron Thomason.
We examine mass protest and political momentum today on The Professors.
From across the city and the 7 city colleges of Chicago, broadcasting from 63rd and Halsted at Kennedy King College. Professors take the art of conversation to a higher degree.
Joining me today are Professors Rashid Carter of Harold Washington College, Pamela Canamore of Kennedy King College, and Ted Williams, also of Kennedy King College. Welcome all.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we talk about the occupation movement. What's your general impression of the occupation?
I think it speaks to a very strong level of discontent that exists. The Tea Party, I think, spoke to it a few years ago. The Occupy movement is speaking to it now. Really, they want many of the same goals, even though they're on different sides of the spectrum. And I think that people are upset. We should actually probably put the two groups together.
Well, yeah, let's do that, because I could hear someone cringe and say, "Oh, we're not like the Tea Party," and I could hear the Tea Party saying, "We're not nothing like the Occupy Wall Street movement." So, in your opinion, what are some of the similarities? What are some of the similar goals or concerns of the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street?
Dissatisfaction with the status quo, this whole notion of an imbalance in power, especially as it's meted out and it affects Main Street Americans, so-called Main Street Americans. This whole notion of the government being more so responsive to the rich and powerful than the regular citizens. I mean, that was the initial issue that the Tea Party had, right? Was some issue with the bailouts that were given by government to wealthy corporations, as opposed to looking out and bailing out those of us who are negatively affected by the financial disaster.
Okay, so we've got discontent with the assimilation of corporations into politics, right?
Yes.
And of course, the complete disdain for the bailout.
Yeah.
Are there any other similarities?
I would say also the high level of inequality that exists. So their whole, their mantra is we're the 99%, the top 1% own what I think is 40% of the wealth in the country.
Yes.
And incomes, it's interesting, if you look between 1979 and 2005, 2/3 of the gains that the United States has had in income have gone to the top 1% of people in this country. And so, sort of the bottom part of the country, I think it's the bottom 80%, I think it is, really only controls something like 40 or 50% of the income in the country or the wealth in the country.
But I have to admit, though, when I was paying attention to the rise of the Tea Party, I never heard about the distribution of wealth. Distribution of wealth, that whole foray did not come
until the Occupy. Yeah, it's different.
But Pamela, what are the similarities?
I was thinking in terms of the similarities because the Republicans seem to co-opt the Tea Party at a time when, and so the similarities are when they started interviewing some of the people that were actually in New York in the audience, the protesters, that the majority, over 50% of the people that they talked to had some type of affiliation with the Democratic Party. Now, the Democrats have not co-opted the Occupy Wall Street movement, but there seems to be a similarity in the two-party system.
Just to be fair, I don't think they've not done it because they can't. You know, I think both parties are political, they're opportunists, so I mean, they would if they could, and I think that that's probably what's going to happen. The Tea Party is very interesting because if you look at it on its surface, it was really about sort of the close to $15 trillion in debt the United States has. And they're really, their overriding message was, let's stop spending so much. The problem with, I think, that movement, and maybe the problem with this movement as well, is that because it was really done under a Democratic president where the Republican president before him was doing all the same things, but they didn't say anything there, it lost its ability to win mainstream America. The Occupy movement, if they don't come up with some real clear goals and an acknowledgement that there is some level of capitalism that works, we just have to figure out ways to make capitalism work the way it is now, and they don't have clear goals, they will lose the public as well.
Well, what I've, the clear goals, I think, I disagree that they do have goals. I think there's not a clear leader at this point.
What are the goals?
Well, they want more and better jobs, that 99%, more equal distribution of their income, bank reform. And we saw where this big bank backed down with that fee they were going to assess on using, Bank of America on the debit card. And so they're taking notice, and a reduction of influence that corporations wield in politics.
But the problem with that message is out of those four, there's only one that's very tangible. So the bank reform is absolutely 100%, and Bank of America example is great, and we use it, we talk about it.
Why aren't the other ones tangible?
More and better jobs.
I think that's tangible.
They're against all the jobs being
when you're talking about
sent out of country.
There we go. See, Pamela and I are chiming.
Okay.
I think that is
but how does that? But specifically, and I think this is where
I think it's possible. It may not be immediate, but it's possible.
Yeah, but it's not tangible. So when you yell at people in power, say, "Give us more jobs," they go, "Yeah, okay, whatever."
Well,
but when you come with a clear ask, like change, say, free trade policies specifically so that there are X number of jobs less.
Is for. So the occupier just needs to hire a lobbyist.
Or no, but they're speaking to the point because what we know this past week, is that there's been a lot of global support and domestic support for this 1% tax on financial transactions and currency trading. And that's something, that's the first real tangible policy aim that's come out of this movement. And if you connect the dots, if that tax were to be put into place and it's been agreed upon by the Chancellor Merkel from Germany, the President of
You're talking about the
France,
G8 summit, correct?
G8 summit, right? G20 summit. They've all sort of agreed here domestically. The President, the majority of Congress also agree. If you can take those resources that come out of this new tax and funnel it into some type of fund that can hopefully produce jobs, that is a means to that end. So I think that one of the things that has to be very important to this movement, and this is something that's really defined protest movements, successful protest movements here in the United States of America over our history, is that the immediate and initial sort of protest and this outpouring of emotion and frustration has to lead to these tangible policy aims and goals that are going to actually better the life of American citizens.
And without leadership, you see how they have a very strong messaging problem. I think what you said was excellent. But the average person who's involved in the movement doesn't know anything about that.
No, I don't think you could say that.
I would argue that very clearly.
That's a broad stroke.
I have seen a ton of video interviews of people involved in these movements. And I'm not saying, let me say this very clearly.
But Ted, come on, okay, first of all, let's talk about where you saw those videos. Who knows if it is a vehicle of propaganda and good editing and the way to make people look disproportionately unintelligent about what they the portrayal that they're having them just angry, which is what happened when the Tea Party first came out. All you just saw was a bunch of angry white people. Literally, you saw a lot of white people, which is a huge difference, I think, by the way. A contrast between the occupation movement and the Tea Party is more racial integration. But I do think that the similarity is that they're both of the same class.
They are, but even that racial question is something they've worked on, because I've even read where they initially didn't have it. And they were, let's put it this way, Russell Simmons showed up at one of the Occupy protests, and they made this huge deal because they're like, oh, look, we have an African American here, and now it just shows we're not like the Tea Party. So I think both of them have had challenges in that. Absolutely.
What occupation are you watching?
I'm telling you from the get-go, this has been a big issue for them.
Okay, well, you know what? Okay, I was really trying to find. I was trying to find some bullet points. But let's talk about the celebrities who do show up at the occupation movement. Isn't it kind of oxymoronic to have Russell come out there and say, yeah, and then he goes and hops in his car with his driver?
But he also helps support financially as well.
Where can I?
Them, not you.
And that the people needed food, and so he paid for some meals.
That's fair.
Or he had some catering come in and support.
But allow me to criticize that for a second too, because to me it sounds as if it's like, yeah, we'll help you. Oh, okay, let me take that back. Let me rewind. To me, it sounds like a convenient way of showing support without being involved.
Okay.
I bought you some tents, I bought you some bags. We cool? We cool. Roger that. But I have yet to see a 1%er, for lack of a better word, that is going in the occupation saying, what is your problem? How can I help you?
Well, maybe not along that margin, but what we know is that Warren Buffett has come as a very strong component. He's behind this 1% tax on financial transactions.
Did you hear the recommendation that he made on how to get rid of the deficit problem? About putting the Congress pay on hold until the budget is balanced?
Absolutely.
And I was like, yeah, that'll get your attention.
I like it.
But that proves the point, though. So, and I think when you have the Warren Buffetts and the Russell Simmons, it takes the protest from being a fringe element of society who are, disheveled and homeless, as a lot of the conservatives are characterizing Occupy Wall Street participants as, and it gives credibility to the movement. Right?
But I still do not think that that's enough. I don't think that's enough. The people are out there because they're angry. I sound like Bob Marley now. Their bellies are full. Their bellies are full, but they're still hungry. So I get that you want to come out there, and it's like to help on the periphery, but it still doesn't get to the core issue. People are out there because their student loans makes their college experience seem completely worthless. People are out there because they are underwater or they have been victims of subprime loans. And after you get through protesting, and thank you, Russell Simmons, for the tent, and thank you, whoever else, for the donut, I still got to go home and deal with those realities. And I'm still angry.
But here's what Russell Simmons can do for them that actually happened with the Tea Party. He can help them to get candidates and get an audience with legislators. And this, I think, will probably be his most significant contribution. Because that's what the Tea Party, that's how they ended up being effective. They went from protests to campaigns. And
but the only reason that they went to that level, and Pamela and I, we were talking about this in the back, is that the only way that they made that transition was because the Republicans, whether it was just good political strategy or just real genuine interest in their concerns, co-opted the Tea Party.
Sure, it was a smart strategy.
The Democrats are not co-opting. It's a very smart strategy. But the Democrats are not co-opting the Tea Party as of yet.
I think maybe it's because they can't. They haven't figured out how to.
Not at this time.
I think not at this time. I don't think that they can.
I think they would want to.
I think that they may.
I think they should.
Right. I think that they may, and that it will happen with the majority of the people that they interviewed. When I looked at the information, there was 1,600 people interviewed that responded to this survey. And a third of the participants in the Occupy are over the age of 35. Half of them work full time. So they're not all unemployed, and only 13% of them are unemployed. 13% earn over $75,000. So this is a comfortable middle class level. And when you see a Occupy, a movement such as this, it's out of something.
Absolutely.
When grassroots organizations start, it's some type of discontent, something that they're not happy with. And I think with the Lehman's collapse and the subsequent financial crisis that happened, the subprime lending fiasco, that it was just inevitable that something was going to happen.
And I'm sorry. And so no, and just to buffer that point, you know, this look back at history and during the civil rights movement, one of the very important catalysts to change and actually translating into a massive support for the civil rights movement, and then of course policy changes that would affect the sort of outcomes that those who are involved in the movement wanted to see, was when the Jim Browns, the Bill Russells, the Harry Belafontes got in front of the camera and said, we are also a part of this, and we're going to stand up behind this message. Yes. And so having these people, I mean, the media is powerful today. The Twitter, the website set up for Occupy, Facebook interactions,
social media.
Social media. It's the reason why.
It just gives reality to Gil Scott-Heron when he said this revolution will not be televised.
It's going to be televised.
I mean, who knew?
951 cities across 82 countries right now. They're doing the same thing in Germany and France, all over the world.
Now let me ask you this. When we read about this in the history books, because it's going to get documented, I want to know, let me ask you this, how do you think it's going to be characterized in the history books?
I think if there is substantive political and policy change, it will be categorized as the catalyst or the impetus for that change. I think if it's just, if it doesn't translate itself into that, I think it'll be just a minor footnote in history.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I know I asked a question, but it's bothering me that we keep saying that they need their own representative, put forth their own candidates. Why can't it just be about holding the existing candidates that they put in office to hold them accountable?
Because, I mean, let's just be realistic.
No, let's be realistic for real, because a lot of them, they're in there for a while. So it's not like I'm going to bring up a candidate and then next thing you know, that person's replaced next week unless they start an impeachment campaign.
Fine. Okay, let's be realistic.
That's right, given.
So Charlie Rangel was out there, right?
All right.
Okay, so Charlie Rangel was out in the New York protest, and I mean, you know, I hate to speak negatively against people, but I mean, he's under an ethics investigation. Charlie Rangel represents the establishment. He's a Democrat, but he's probably taken millions of dollars from lobbyists over the time of his career. So the idea that having a political movement is going to automatically
but
that day change.
But that's not why he's under ethics review.
Yeah, but
he's under ethics review for not paying his taxes on those properties.
Okay, fine, but you must understand overall the point about his relationship to lobbyists, like the relationship that all of these politicians have to lobbyists, is problematic. And so I think that they'd be better off, like the Tea Party did, say, hey, you know what, I'm done with you. I'm getting a candidate in here that's going to really...
But Tad, let's look at the performance of their candidates. Well, first of all, their presidential candidate now announces that she's not running and she took the money home with her.
Yeah.
Strike one.
Sure.
Then they got what? How many Tea Parties do they have in the House?
But they have been effective.
33% of Congress.
Yes, they have been effective on the
Have they really been effective?
They
like
have
at
electing.
Well, I think that star is dimming. I mean, if you look at the approval ratings, it's at 27% right now. So their approval ratings is dimming. If you look at all of the look at the arc of the Republican primary right now, all of the Tea Party sponsored candidates are all falling by the wayside. The most recent example being the Perry and then Kaine. Who's taking the lead? Mitt Romney, someone that nobody wanted to put at the forefront, but he's part of the establishment Republican.
What do you guys think about Ron Paul?
I don't think about Ron Paul at all. I don't have any thought about Ron Paul because I don't really think about Republicans too much. But at the end of the day, what I think about is fairness for all people. And that's why, to answer your question, I wouldn't be, from a historical perspective, I think the story is still to be told in terms of what this is going to lead to. Right. And the thing we can't do is forget the global context of what this movement means. Sure. If you look at what's happening in Greece right now, we're talking about the government being destabilized entirely. Yeah. We're talking about the European nations who consolidate for economic parity in a global marketplace. They're in a serious state of peril and question right now. So we don't know where how this is going to translate into a new European union or what that's going to look like economically or politically there. We don't know what's going to happen here. This might be the thing that really galvanizes Obama's presidency.
Potentially.
Right? It could. So we don't know.
Yeah.
We just don't know.
And then we were talking about not a clear leader, but I want to take it back to what Rashid was saying about the history, the civil rights movement. Before there was a Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., there was Medgar Evers,
Absolutely.
who was in the forefront. And before it was the civil rights movement, there was the Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
That's right.
And so with the Occupy Wall Street, although at this time there doesn't seem to be an apparent leader, there will be someone, I believe, that will emerge.
Yeah, and hopefully,
I hope someone emerges, but I hope we
yeah.
don't fall prey to this whole Messiah complex. We have a tendency to fall into this
Correct.
Messiah
We do.
complex
We
that
do.
kills
We
us.
do.
And I hope whoever the person is that finally decides to hit the microphone and say that I'm here to speak on behalf, I hope that person really has good character.
Well, you're right.
Because it's going to discredit everything that he's going to try to do, especially if it counters capitalistic endeavors.
But what does good character count for? President
Well,
Obama has
if
good
he's
character.
married, I hope he's not cheating. I hope they don't got him on tape
But
cheating. I
those
hope they
are
don't
all-
got him on
those are
tape.
ancillary issues
Really?
They're
that we
not
get caught up.
ancillary issues.
They are like Herman
Ask
Cain.
Weiner. Was
like,
it ancillary for Weiner?
Come on. Well, yes. I mean, yes, it wasn't ancillary
And
for
don't
him.
take a picture of yourself right
No,
now.
This is public television now.
No, we no pictures.
Chest up, chest
No,
up.
yeah, any pictures I
Focus,
take
you
will
all.
be just right here. But anyway, the point is that yes, that was a problem, but the media has focused, like they're focusing on Herman Cain and the sexual harassment. This is silly stuff. This is ridiculous stuff. The person
But
that will
it
step
sounds like
forward.
you're saying character doesn't matter.
It's not the issue of character. President Obama has character, but he's still not answering their issues.
Well,
So what
we
they
know,
need.
Come on now, it don't take all day to recognize sunshine. We know what that's about too.
But they need someone who's going to really be a part of them. And here's the reality: why they don't have a leader is not because they haven't tried. That's part of their. That is what they're proud of. They're saying, hey, on their website, we don't have a leader.
Are you familiar
and that's only
with
going to last so long.
Okay. Are you familiar with their General Assembly approach? It's phenomenal. I enjoy it. Only one person speaks. Everyone repeats what the person is saying. There's huge. The night before, everyone makes sure they're all on the same page and they really talk it out. They vote it out.
Sure.
They vote it out. They talk about how to agree and disagree. I think that's a lot of things that can be co-opted.
That's powerful, and I'm glad you
But
mentioned
you're saying
that.
it's not enough?
Well, no, I'm not saying that. I think Ted said that. What
I
I'm
don't think
saying
Ted said that. I think Pamela said that.
Passing the buck. That's what needs to change. But no, that's powerful. This whole notion of cooperation. A lot of the media mocks
Say
that
that
whole
word again.
human
Cooperation.
Cooperation. That's really what this is about. It's about reforming this thing, this American experiment that's gone awry. And I think if nothing else, that's the lasting legacy, or one of the lasting legacies that this Occupy movement can lead to. Is a good anecdote from the Zuccotti Park part of the movement. The police came in with the mayor. He wanted to get them out because he wanted the city to come and clean the park, which was an excuse just to get them out the way.
Is
right?
that Oakland? You talking about Oakland or
In Zuccotti, New York.
New York.
Right?
New
They
York.
wanted to clean the
That's where
park up.
Occupy is
And
taking
what did the
place.
people, the Occupy movement participants in Zuccotti Park do? They
cleaned
said,
up.
we'll clean it ourselves. And they cleaned the park up.
Yeah.
That put pressure on elected officials who put pressure on the Brookfield organization who was in charge of that to back off and let them stay without coming in and pushing
Then
them
how
out the
come
way.
they can't stay in Chicago?
Because this is Zuccotti Park is a private property. It's private property.
Oh,
In
thank you,
Chicago,
Pamela.
the parks close at 11.
Close at 11.
And
so you
so
gotta wrap it up.
unless someone opens up their estate and allows the people to come and camp out on private grounds, but Zuccotti Park is a private property.
And let me say this, my criticism of the movement is not from a place where I'm not connected to what they're doing. I want them to get policies. I want them to push forth an agenda because we do have an increasingly unequal system that we live in.
We do.
And you know, I mean, we're academics, but the reality is that we struggle with a lot of the same issues these folks are
We
struggling with
certainly
too.
do. And I'm glad, because I would love to seg into, as we close out our discussion, I know one thing for certain is I know Ted, I saw you during Faculty Development Week and did the presentation about civic engagement, and it really got me to thinking more carefully and more critically about the value of teaching students and showing students what it means to be civically engaged. Now, one thing for certain is this Occupy movement and the Tea Party movement has showed that it is refreshing, in my opinion, it is refreshing to see so many Americans civically engaged.
Yes, indeed.
With that, I want to know is it too personal to ask, do you have plans of participating in the occupation in Chicago?
Yes,
Ted?
I do.
Pamela?
Yes.
Yes.
I do, but it's a matter of how you want to participate.
How will you participate?
All right, so I want to be able to lend a voice through media outlets, to be able to teach. We're instructors, so we have a forum that we can use on a very regular basis to espouse some of the beliefs. We don't necessarily have to be out there. Many of us with kids and responsibilities, it's hard to do that. That's no excuse. But ultimately, if we can use the wide array of opportunities to express our issues, to support, there's a lot of options.
There are lots of options. It's just, for me, I want to take the Facebook revolutionaries, and I just want to, be like, put your mouth where the gravel is. Sure. And I think it is easy to click a button and make a donation and say I support it. But when you talk about children, as a mother, my husband and I, we feel obligated to take our children.
Absolutely.
Do you think that this is?
Well, let me say this though. I don't want you to diminish the contributions of the Russell Simmons, of the professors who have an outlet on a talk show or whatever. Those are very important. Without those contributions, without somebody clicking on the internet and sending some money, the movement dies.
This is true.
So it's I think in every movement, you've got people on the ground, you've got people in different places who are supporting, and I think at the end of the day, as long as their heart and their actions support the movement, then the method that they use is not as important, I think.
And it has to be coalescence and cooperation. We all have to be speaking the same language. We have to be working in lockstep with one another, so that we don't so that our action doesn't diminish someone else's actions or aims. We have to be together.
Well, believe it or not, we have exhausted our half hour. I know, I want to keep talking.
Started.
So with that being said, let's quickly, if everyone can just give me their last thoughts.
Sure.
Rashid, well, let's start with Pamela.
Please,
Pamela, what are your last thoughts?
Okay, well, with my last thoughts, what I came up with is biblical. In 1 John 5:21, it says, "People, keep yourselves from idols, false gods, from anything and everything that would occupy the place in your heart that's due to God, from any sort of substitute for Him that would take first place in your life." So if Wall Street, not to occupy Wall Street, but if Wall Street is the heart of America, then we need to beware, because the love of money is the root of evil. Not having money is the love of money. And so we want to put first things first, and it's people. It's charity, compassion, sympathy, and kindness. Humanity should come first.
I agree. Rashid, last thoughts briefly?
Protest and deconstruction must be replaced by a new construction of a society that's bounded together by love. And so I absolutely agree with Pamela. This whole notion of cooperation has to be the platform through which all of the other objectives that the Occupy movement wants to obtain occurs.
Ted, can you do that briefly?
No, but I'll try. Real quickly, no, but I would say what we're seeing now is very real discontent. It's important. We have to address the inequality that exists. But we've got to do it, I think, in a way that is constructive, is productive, and I think that really, in many ways, does not necessarily pit Americans against each other, because I don't think we're going to win any battles that way. And truthfully, as much as the 1% may be doing well, there are things they've contributed. Look at someone like Steve Jobs, who has provided jobs for many people. But we've got to break this, and I think what Pamela's talking about really is the heart of the issue, which I think is extremely important to talk about as well.
And my final thoughts, I said, would be, I think this is the harsh reality of what we would call aspiration politics. And we'll talk about that next time.
All right.
The spectacle of the cable news coverage and headlines will in time fade from the Occupy Wall Street movement, just as it was for the Arab Spring, the Tea Party, and all mass protest movements in history. The ultimate success or failure of a movement is determined by the extent to which it becomes a political reality. And in this, you as a citizen can make a simple choice to have your voice heard at the ballot box. For the professors, I'm CM Winters Palacio. Thank you for watching and coexist.